The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory be to you, O Lord.
At this time, Jesus said to his disciples, "Know this, that if the master of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have left his house to be broken into. You also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect." Peter said, "Lord, are you telling this parable for us or for all?" And the Lord said, "Who then is the faithful and wise manager, whom his master will set over his household, to give them the portion of food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will set him over all his possessions. But if that servant says to himself, 'My master is delaying in coming,' and begins to beat the male and female servants, and to eat and drink and get drunk, the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he does not know, and will cut him in pieces, and will put him with the unfaithful. And that servant who knew his master's will, but did not get ready or act according to his will receive a severe beating. But the one who did not know and did what deserved a beating will receive a lighter beating. Everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required. And from to whom they have entrusted much, they will demand the more." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Please be seated. Our text today is from Luke chapter 12, verses 39 to 48. Luke chapter 12. So, my dear sisters and brothers, the focus of today's Gospel shifts a bit from yesterday. Remember, these are two parables placed side by side. And yesterday, we spoke of those who give service to the church. We call them, I said, even though the translation is servant, the word in Greek is oikonomos, those who give service to the church. So yesterday we spoke of those who give service to the church, and today the Gospel focuses on the diligent manager. That is the focus on the Gospel. Now Luke presents Jesus as one who examines both the sheep as well as the shepherd. So it's not only the sheep that are examined, but also the shepherds of the flock that are examined. Each one seems to have a certain responsibility in the church, and therefore there is a call in the church that if you are given responsibility, then there is a demand to live up to that responsibility. Now, the focus of today's Gospel, as I said, is the prudent manager or the diligent manager who has been given task of the master's household. So, in short, he was the second in command after the boss, responsible especially for those who work in it, to give them their food at the right time, to make sure that they did the right amount of work, and that their allowances, their salaries, were paid at the right time. This was really the person in charge of, very often at the time of Jesus, a very large estate. Now, the infant church of St. Luke, in a way, is already recognizing the growth of the church. And remember that with growth of the church always comes leadership roles. Yesterday we heard of the oikonomos, or those who give service in the church. Today we are hearing of perhaps a person one higher in the rung of leadership, the diligent or the prudent manager. So there is clearly now, we can see a development of leadership in the church. Remember that St. Luke was also a companion of St. Paul, and Paul wrote several letters to Timothy and Titus. And if you read these letters, you will see that, especially in the letters of St. Paul to Timothy, there is a very well-developed hierarchy already in the 1st and 2nd century in the church. Clearly, there were different people doing different roles. I must tell you that in time, a lot of those roles got muddled up. Yeah, there is a very clear role of the bishop, the episcopos, and the elder, which then got merged. But there were even roles like the deacons of the church. We know that from the Acts of the Apostles that there were 7 deacons, and the deacons were given the job of really handling the finances of the church. They were the ones who distributed the money and the food to those who were in need. Over a period of time, that has now become the prerogative, literally, of the clergy. There are other churches in South India where the finances of the church, for example, are not in the hands of the clergy, it's in the hands of the laity. Now, there are plus points and demerits in this whole procedure, and I'm not saying one is better than the other, but the fact is that the church clearly has a systematized way of organization, and that beauty goes back to the 1st century. So the infant church of St. Luke already has very clear leadership roles. And Luke is also aware that power can corrupt. If you listen to the parable of today, Jesus, in talking about the manager, gives you a scenario of a diligent manager and then of another manager who's very tardy in his work. In fact, he perhaps is very dictatorial, goes around beating the servants. The words are literally, he beats them and mistreats them. Remember that at the end of the parable, he gets the same punishment. He gets a good beating, a good hiding himself. So what is Luke doing? He understands that power also in the church corrupts, and therefore he's writing these parables to warn his infant church of the mistakes that they could make. Look how he places these two parables. Where is Jesus? Jesus is walking towards Jerusalem. He's walking towards his death. And in presenting these two parables side by side to those who are listening, Peter was one of them. Ironically, Peter says, Lord, is this for us or is it for all? I mean, Jesus would have answered Peter, come on, Peter, are you a servant in the church or are you not? Don't ask silly questions. And it's a very interesting thing that Peter asks, because very often we think, I'm not saying that Peter's question was very valid. In fact, it was a rather invalid question. And Jesus answers him very well. Because the whole question sometimes is, well, in that case, are you talking about only for the priests? Or is this applicable for the priests and the laity? Or is this their job? Or is this our job? And Jesus is very clear. Have you been given a task? Yes or no? If you have been given a task, are you doing your task? Yes or no? So Peter, don't ask that question. If you've been given a task, really, then simply do it. That's what Jesus was really saying. So yesterday's gospel had the faithful servant, or those who render service to the Christian community, rewarded. If you remember, those who were faithful were rewarded at a place at the table at the Messianic banquet where, as we saw yesterday, the impossible happened. Jesus himself wears an apron. He comes, or the Lord, the Master, will wear an apron and serve those who have served his church. Interestingly, what is the reward today for the faithful manager? What does he get for his fidelity? Now, you would think, well, if those who simply gave service to the church would finally be seated at the Lord's table and the Lord would serve them, then I think those who are managers should be given a higher reward. That's the way we normally think. Look what Jesus says. He says, your reward will be that you are put in, more work will be given to you. Now you'll get all the master's possessions to look after. So long you got this, now you're going to get even more. And it's very interesting that somehow in our minds, we are very reward oriented. We are not service oriented for the sake of service. We are very often service oriented for the sake of reward, for the sake of acknowledgement, for the sake of human honors. When St. John Marie Vianney was, because of his ministry, thousands of people flocked, and then the government began to notice, in Ars, they began to notice the greatness of this man, and they wanted to give him a medal, if I'm not mistaken. And he said something like, "What am I going to do with these trifles? Will I show this to the Lord in heaven? Look, I got a medal." Yeah. I think in a way he was communicating the fact that service itself is its reward. I know that human as we are, we like acknowledgement. I must confess that if the cardinal had to call me and say, "Well, Warner, you're doing a very good job," I'd feel happy. Yeah. But to live for it. And here's the problem. When I do not get it, I throw a fit and a tantrum, which is so common very often of people who serve in the church. The Lord very clearly says to the manager, "Well, if you have done more work in St. Jude's, well, we're going to give you more work. Yeah, you're not going to be sitting at some other table and now enjoying yourself. More work will be given." So Jesus is very clear. Now, when this entire pericope with both the parables are looked together, both the faithful steward starting in verse 32 and the faithful manager in verse 42, when you see them together, you begin to realize that God gives responsibilities to each one of us according to our ability. He gives us, let me say that again, God gives us responsibilities according to our ability. God doesn't say to us, or God knows what we are capable of. He doesn't say, "You know what, I'm going to now give you something that is impossible and you will fail and you will not succeed at it, and I'm going to sit back and watch you squirm there." You think God is so narcissistic? You think he enjoys torturing us? Absolutely not. So whenever you are given a responsibility in the church, whatever it may be, my dear brothers and sisters, know this, that it comes from God. You know, I've learned one thing, and I must confess again, that, you know, it's very human on our part, even as priests, to desire certain parishes, even in Bombay City. And maybe one of the reasons why is because, you know, it's put in the heads of our lay people. Let me give an example. When I was sent from Mount Carmel's parish in Bandra, which is considered by some measure and means a very prestigious parish, to Malad East, which at that time was a one bedroom apartments put together on the ground floor of a building, I remember many people, friends of mine, began to say things like, "Where have they sent you?" It was almost like, "What have you done that you are being punished to be sent to Malad East?" I remember when they used to say, "Where have they sent you?" I'd say, "I'm still in Bombay City, but it's so far, Father." And I would always say to them, "But far from whom? Far from Bandra? Because if you're in Borivali, it's very close." Yeah. So, you know, people say these kind of patronizing things to you, and in a way it messes up the minds of the priests, because you feel, "Oh, I'm being punished now. See, even the people think I'm not being given a good posting." I wonder what is a good posting. Sometimes I feel that when people talk to us and we believe this, we are no better than some public servant who has to pay a bribe to get a particular posting so that he has a certain standard. You know what I'm talking about. I don't need to say it quite explicitly. But then we become the same. So please don't say this to the clergy. "Father, oh, you've been sent to this parish. Oh, it's a great parish." And why is it great very often? Because they get a lot of money. So what are you really saying? That a good posting is equivalent to the Sunday collection that the people get? I can debunk that theory and tell you that very often poorer parishes give more. If you take on a basis of how many parishioners and what is the collection, I can debunk even that theory, and I've actually done a bit of a study myself. So this concept of, you know, in sometimes I feel, "Oh, now where are they going to send me from here?" It worries us, and I'm being honest with you. You feel, then you have to learn to trust in God. Because then we are playing this game, yeah, that because I've been a diligent manager, or you have been a diligent servant, therefore we have to be rewarded. And Jesus tells his diligent managers today, "Well, I'm going to give you more. I'm going to give you all my possessions, but that's more work, not less work. You're not going to get one cushy chair." That's what Jesus is really saying to all of us today. So, remember that all of us have been given responsibility according to our abilities. But if we are given responsibilities according to our abilities, my dear brothers and sisters, then Jesus demands accountability. Accountability. You know, as you heard this pericope wind down in the last 2 verses, we were reminded in verse 48, very interestingly, that some have been given and some have been entrusted. I don't know whether you caught those words. To some it has been given, and to some it has been entrusted. Now, to those who have been given, I think would include the whole of, or every member of Christianity. Every baptized person, by virtue of your baptism, we all share in the triple ministry of Christ as prophet, priest, and king. So it has been given to us. Responsibility has been given to all of us. And very clearly Jesus says, much will be required. Much will be required. So I'm saying this straight away because there are many Christians who think that all I have to do to be a good Christian is to tick off maybe 2 check boxes. Make sure that on Sunday I go for Mass and say my prayers or my rosary every day. If I tick box these, then fine. Hello. That's not what Jesus is saying. He's saying everybody has been given responsibility. Don't just tick boxes and think I'm playing it safe. No. Everybody, you and I, all have been given something. We share in Christ's ministry, which means that therefore much will be required. And then there is the second, if I may assume that the second is the ministerial priesthood, which we share in, which I share in. Jesus very clearly says that from us much more will be demanded, because we are the shepherds of the flock. Maybe from you, Jesus says, much will be required. But from us, Jesus is very clearly saying, much more will be demanded. So Jesus is saying to his priests, St. Luke is writing to his leaders, that God demands more of the priesthood. He demands more from the clergy. He demands more from the religious. We cannot also be happy with ticking boxes and saying, did I say my daily Mass? Yes. Have I been a little charitable to 3 parishioners? Yes. No. God demands more from us, just as he requires you to also meet up with your responsibilities. So clearly, my dear brothers and sisters, there are no free lunches or free rides in the church. Everybody in the church has a job. You and I, all of us have a job. You can't just sit here, because there is no room in Christianity for armchair Christians. And I'm saying this as a warning, because very often I hear people say, oh, what is the church doing? What are the priests doing? What is the community animator doing? Well, the question is, my friend, what are you doing? Besides, of course, criticizing us and saying that we are not doing what we are allegedly not doing, because that's your perspective. What are you doing? There is no room in the church for armchair Christians. No room whatsoever. And if you find yourself sitting and only passing comments and not being involved in the church's ministry and the church's life, then please remember what Jesus said at the end. He said, a good beating awaits you. He said it, I didn't say it. Sounds very harsh, but very clear. A good beating awaits you. Because you cannot go to the Lord and say, well, Lord, I went for Sunday Mass, I was baptized, I said my rosary, now good luck to the whole world in this time of COVID, let everybody manage. No, no, no. Well, could you have done something? Could you have done anything? And that is the point our Lord is making. All those who profess the faith will be held accountable, even though, as we can see, culpability may vary.